It's a real pleasure to be here. So thanks for picking a brilliant venue, Benefex. I mean, this is cool beyond words. So a little bit about me to get us going then. So I've got a whole list of things I do. So Andy asked the question, what's work? I don't have a job anymore, but I have a sort of portfolio come wheelbarrow of things that I like to get involved in. So I work in all sorts of different ways, and I quite like the fact, I'm a bit contrarian, I like the fact that I don't have a job description, because I hate the things with a passion. So I'm going to connect into Andy's work quite a bit. So I pop up in certain education venues. I've got a couple of TEDx's out, and some of the stuff I'm going to do today is perhaps a little bit of a, if you know your house music, Frankie Knuckles remix of my TEDx. So you will get to watch it afterwards if you want to, he says, trying to boost the number of hits on his TEDx video. So I get about a bit, and I'm really into the whole concept that Matt talked about, which is design thinking. So design thinking, organizational effectiveness, human-centered design, all those things really fascinate me. I just happen to also be a practitioner in the HR world. So I often say to people I'm in HR, and then they come back to me with the normal response, which is, so you hire people and fire people and spoil Christmas parties and all that shit. And I go, no, I don't. I don't do that. Some people may do that, but I don't do that. And then I genuinely tell people what I get to do in HR. And I've had taxi drivers turn to me and say, I'm going to tell my daughter about studying HR because I like the sound of this thing. So, we can glam it up a bit, I think. Let's not worry about that. As I said, I get about a bit. And only yesterday I was in Bucharest, and I landed and got into bed about 1:30 this morning after very little sleep. But when you're like me and you get really excited about the work you do in HR's sort of role in work, then you can put up with things like that. Now, part of the reason I've got that up there is because I get around a bit. I get to talk to people from different geographies about the issues and the challenges that they face, both in an HR world and in the world of work. And there's kind of good news. The good news is it doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter how developed or what your GDP is. We're all facing the same things, which is we've got work that people have to do economically or for their esteem, and a lot of it is frankly pretty crap, and we need to uncrap it. So that's kind of the stuff I do for these kinds of people. The other reason I like to put this slide up is to show the sort of variety of people who are perhaps brave/stupid enough to get me to come in and help them out, but also because I have a bit of an OCD. Can you see what it is? Colours. Like the colours of the logos of the clients and stuff. Anyway, so these are people who I like to work with, and that's the book. I've got to plug it a bit. I sunk about 100 days of my life into writing this book. Didn't earn very much as well, so I burnt my runway, as the techies say. But when you get the call to write a book about something you really believe in, something you want to see happen, which is that HR stops being an apologetic rule-making function and becomes something that grabs work by the scruff of the neck, humanizes it, and helps people flourish, you don't turn that down. So that's what I've tried to do with that book. And as Matt said and Gethin said, you can win a copy of this book. That deserves a woo. Thank you. And there's a quiz, and you've got to do a bit of a treasure hunt to do it. Are you ready for this? So the quiz is, that is a guy called Vince Lombardi. Now, he was the head coach of the Super Bowl winning Green Bay Packers. The story of the Green Bay Packers is something you can check out if you want to, but they're a fan-owned club. And in the 60s, they were probably the smallest American football club going, but they won the Super Bowl 2 years on trot. The trophy that they win now in the Super Bowl, they call it the World Champions, even though only Americans play American football, and Canadians, of course. The trophy is now called the Lombardi Trophy. So he had such a profound impact on the sport, they named the trophy after him. Now, in my book, I use a Vince Lombardi quote. I'd love you to find out what that quote is and tweet it on the Benefex hashtag, and we'll pick your 10 winners. I'm making you work for this, aren't I, people? I'm not just giving them away like confetti. So if you can find the Vince Lombardi quote that I use in my book, you can have a copy of the book if you put it on Twitter. Anyway, so let's get into the substance of what I wanted to talk about, and I want to start with this guy. Anybody recognize who that is? Yes. Marvin Gaye. Now, I've got an extra copy of the book. Come and see me afterwards. You can have it because you know Marvin Gaye, so thank you. So Marvin Pence Gaye Jr., to give him his full title, is one of the probably most famous of the Motown stable of singers from the 60s through into the 70s. And it's the story of Marvin Gaye that I want to begin with and tell you all about, because my obsession is about human energy and organization design. So that crap experience I talked about that some people have at work, I think is an enormous waste of human energy. And I want to see workplaces that can help put that right. And I'll help you by telling the story of Marvin Gaye. So in the 50s, Marvin was a singer in a doo-wop group called the Moonglows, and he came to the attention of somebody who was setting up a pretty entrepreneurial enterprise in the US in the early 60s, a guy called Berry Gordy Jr., who created the Motown empire. So he heard Marvin was a talented individual, so he did his talent acquisition thing. You know, he was an HR practitioner, but all bar name. And so he brought Marvin in, and initially what Marvin's job was to do some backing vocals. He played the drums a bit. He wrote some song lyrics. But after a while, Berry Gordy started to get some real traction behind the Motown empire, and he started to see that the white middle-class American young public were buying this kind of music. So he was getting Billboard Top 100 type hits, and he thought Marvin's got a chance to shine. The only thing that was an issue was that Marvin Gaye's energy was to become the Black Frank Sinatra. That's what he wanted to become. He loved the sort of mellow sound of swing and jazz, and he wanted to be this kind of crooning singer. And that was at odds with Berry Gordy's mission for the company to appeal to the younger faculty in America, because they were buying pop and soul and R&B. So Berry played a bit of a trick on Marvin without Marvin knowing. He spoke to the writers and producers of Marvin Gaye's music, Holland Dozier Holland, Norman Whitfield, Smokey Robinson, and said, score Marvin's music 1 octave higher than he would normally sing it. So he made Marvin stretch for notes by having it 1 octave higher. What Berry Gordy knew was that Marvin Gaye had a 4-octave range anyway. So this wasn't something Marvin didn't have the ability to do, but it just wasn't Marvin's preferred style. So Berry Gordy kind of re-engineered his energy into this 1 octave higher methodology. And if you know anything about some of the biggest Motown hits of the 60s and 70s, Can I Get a Witness, You're All I Need to Get By, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, Ain't That Peculiar. These were all Marvin Gaye hits, scored 1 octave higher than Marvin thought he was going to be singing at. And of course, when success happens, you accept that that's what your employer does. It perhaps stretches you a bit and takes you in an area where you perhaps didn't realize you could go. But there's another twist to this story about energy, because in the 70s, towards the early part of the 70s, lots of big socio-political shifts were happening in the US with racial segregation and protests and so on. And Marvin Gaye came across a song that was being written by one of the Four Tops, another Motown group, a guy called Obie Benson. And he'd seen some police brutality in protests on the street, and he started to write a protest song, showed it to Marvin Gaye, who was himself quite politically motivated, and he co-wrote it and said, I want to record this. So he took that song to Berry Gordy saying, look, I'm a star now, I've heard it through the grapevine, hit the world top 10s, I want to record this. And Berry Gordy flatly refused and said, no, Motown is not a social protest forum, it's a pop music label. So what Marvin Gaye did was he withdrew his energy from the Motown empire. He said, I'm on strike then. Now, history will tell you who won that battle, because What's Going On was the song that Marvin recorded, which has kind of become a bit of an epoch in those politically motivated and very sensibly drafted call-outs, I guess, to human nature to say, let's stop being horrible to each other and so on. And if you listen to the lyrics of What's Going On, you could plant that in the US right now, and it still has relevance. So there's a story of energy in the workplace where, on the one hand, the organization created a different energy to get Marvin to be successful. And then when Marvin himself became successful and was aware of his capabilities, he switched the energy back to him. And that's Andy's plea there, to recognize people and the kind of exchange that goes on in the workplace. So I guess my call to you to start with is, what's your version of 1 octave higher? What can you do in your workplace to create 1 octave higher for those people who you've got talented individuals working around you? And it comes back to Matt's list, which is why I've got it here, where it says you have a great deal of unused capacity which you have not turned to your advantage. I'd love the thought of HR becoming almost like engineers of capacity creation, in tune with the energy of the people who come to our workplace and do the stuff that's going on around us to look after us. So what's your version of 1 octave higher? So energy. So there's this kind of weird, I guess, perspective going on in the workplace where we aren't looking at energy enough. Job descriptions never say, I'd like somebody who's got this kind of energy and we'll give you this kind of energy back in return. We think about it as a sort of knowledge and skills exchange for doing stuff. But inside us, we physically have about 20 watts of energy. So if I wanted to, long enough, I could hold a light bulb, probably generate enough energy to make that light bulb come on. We have physical, electrical impulses going through our body. And you know when you've been in a situation where perhaps you've been concentrating on some 76-page HR policy, and your energy is draining out of you. You're trying to spot the errors and the things that the unions are going to jump all over. So actually, even mentally, we find ourselves quite challenged in how we use energy in the workplace. But 20 watts is what we have. And so this is behind the theory of the Wachowskis' film The Matrix. If you know anything about The Matrix, it's a sort of dystopian future where the computers have taken over and created a virtual world where we live only by form of memory kind of construct. And we are using our 20 watts to power that machine. So the Matrix is using us to energize its virtual world that we exist in. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the workplace is a bit like the Matrix. We turn up, we plug in, we get discharged with the energy we use to do our jobs. We often go home incredibly exhausted. Yes, we can re-energize. We can watch a football game with a last-minute penalty win that gets us a bit vibrant. But there are things about the workplace where there doesn't seem to be much of an energy exchange. We don't seem to get much energy back. And HR is culpable, responsible, and has potential solutions in this, because some of that dullness that Andy talked about with how we bracket people and ignore some of their better qualities is down to the fact that either HR's constructed it that way, cut and paste lifestyle, or the businesses we work in haven't allowed us to be more adventurous in how we channel human energy. So I think there's the kind of triangulation in the workplace going on, that we've got a really strong way of being able to channel. It's purpose, it's the people, and it's the processes that deliver that purpose. That's those three things that we're trying to triangulate all the time. The best process for the best people to deliver the best purposeful existence that we have in the workplace. So our existence is like this. We're like a smartphone just running down. And you know what happens when you're out and you've had a couple of drinks and you've got to get that last-minute Uber and you're running out of battery, you call the Uber and then it disappears and you're like, I don't even know whether the Uber is going to find me now. That's a bad place to be in. That's why there's a great industry in those battery packs that we carry around with us. But I don't want work to be like that. I don't want work to be a place that we just discharge. So I think we've got the opportunity to avoid this constant depletion in the way we design some of the work that people do. And I think we paper over the cracks with something I can only describe as dirty energy. So I'm going to give you an example of me indulging in some dirty energy over the last couple of days with legal stimulants. So while I was delivering a workshop in Bucharest, I just had the desire for full-fat Coke. That's a bit of a caffeine kick, sugar kick, dirty energy fix for my lack of sleep. And then on the plane home, I thought, I've got to drive home, so I got a can of Red Bull. So all the time what I was doing, I was using dirty energy to replace the fact that I was de-energized. That was my own doing. But actually, I see a lot of people having to rely on artificial stimulants, caffeine addiction, those kinds of things. So let's not have much dirty energy. And we've got lots of wellness offers around us today. So that's what I think we're probably starting to believe is potentially a solution for us, is to focus on wellness. And this is not something that the boardroom shouldn't listen to, right? This is not some hokey, let's all just be nice and happy and well. In 2016 and 17, the health and safety executives did some research about work-related absences, and we found through that we lost 12.5 million people days through stress-related absences in 1 year, 12.5 million people days. And 40% of those people who were stressed by the work they did said that it was purely about workload. So we are literally working people to being ill. In Japan, there's a term called karoshi, which means work yourself to death. And there's a professor from Stanford University in the US, Jeffrey Pfeffer, who's just written a book called Dying for a Paycheck, We are in a position where the biggest killer, an epidemic for us in the 21st century, isn't influenza like in the 19th century. It isn't cancer like in the 20th. It is mental ill health and stress-related early and premature death. So we are working people to death. That cannot be right. So how do we do a regenerative approach to the workplace? So we have lots of initiatives. We have beautiful offers on place here with cycling to work and looking after people in a health sense. These are part of the solution. But I think we need to think about the design of the work that people are involved in and bring something in called regenerative energy. And I guess my assertion is that a lot of the working conditions we have, we could call them a cage. We literally bring people in, lock them into a cage, they do their work on a hamster wheel, and then they go home. So I don't want workplaces to be this kind of living museum. And if you've seen some of the movies, some of the box set Black Mirror, there's this job you do where you cycle to create energy and you earn credits and you can spend them watching films in your small cube. We are headed towards an existence where literally we're running to keep up. So my solution to this is to break out of the cage and go to the edge. Now, it's a metaphorical thing I'm talking about here, but instead of locking people inside a pyramid, I think there's a potential energy creation where we can send people to the edge of the organization. We can send them to the edge of their known role and job description. Because when I talk about the edge, I'm talking about creation and finding new things that give us energy, new learning that helps us do our work better, new understanding of human science so we can relate to our colleagues better, new opportunities for business growth, new opportunities to find colleagues to come and work in your place. So we only get those at the edge of the organization. And I'm suggesting that HR has a big design challenge on its hands, that we design less for the cage and design more for the edge, a place where you can explore, discover, and regenerate what you do. And so new is the kind of essence, the discovery of new, the activation of new, thinking about all the things that stimulate us. Often it's when we are discovering, finding, and experiencing and being involved in new things. So I'm going to introduce a new quotient. We've got intellectual quotient that says how intelligent and how much memory can you rely on to recite facts and show your intelligence. And we've now got a really nice balance to that with emotional quotient. Do you know yourself? Are you aware of your impact on other people socially? And I'm suggesting we start thinking about another form of new, which is energy quotient. How do we expend our energy? How do we recharge our energy? And even, what is our impact on the energy of other people? You've heard the phrase mood hoovers, right? And vampires and radiators and all that kind of stuff. Nobody wants to be on the team with the mood hoover, right? But there is something about, well, where are those people losing the energy to be positive? And why do they feel the need to expend their energy in such a negative way? So I think we need to do some self-appraisal. I think we need to look at how we are in the world, what energizes us, and if our job's not doing that, it would be really trite of me to say, well, just give it up and bugger off and do something else, because that's not the facts that we have to rely on. People need economics and security and esteem and so on. But I suggest that if people say, I think I'm in the wrong place, I think the work I'm doing is not who I am, how can we redesign what I do and how I do it and work with HR? But I think that only comes from an understanding of self. And then you need to surround yourself with people who give you energy. So here is a few people who do that for me. So starting over here, there's Mrs. T. She gives me some energy because she tolerates the fact that I'm obsessed with work and I have little sleep and I travel all over the world. But I have to look after her energy too because she has multiple sclerosis. So there's something we have to work on about how do we make the best of the day she has with the little energy that she's got. And sat next to Mrs. T is Brock, who's in the room here, who's brought her energy from Australia to join me because we are both kind of keen and committed in creating a different future for work. Barbara Thompson, who works in learning and development, but is one of the most artistic and creative sorts. A conversation with Barbara sets me off on all sorts of adventures and opportunities. Helen Sanderson works with a healthcare organization in the Northwest called Wellbeing Teams, and she wants to rewrite healthcare so it's human-centered but also CQC compliant. So just listening to how Helen wants to run her business fills me with hope and aspiration. And that's Siobhan Sheridan. HR Director of the Year, but also somebody who's one of the busiest HR directors that I know. She's the HR Director at the Ministry of Defence Civil. But if you want something from Siobhan, if you want to be mentored by Siobhan, don't all do it at once. Siobhan will find the time, she'll give you her energy, she'll share her thoughts, and I just can't believe that I'm lucky enough to have people like that around who help me with my energy. So I try and give it back. Find yourself your bench. Get your energy sorted from other people. And then collectively, there are some organizations and some methods that I think we can deploy. So this is the story of a submarine which was the worst performing sub in the US. And the guy in the middle is the captain, a guy called David Marquet. I'm not going to tell you too much about the story because he's got some lovely videos out there about how he turned the ship around. He turned the worst performing sub in the Navy fleet around because he capitalized on the energy of his crew. He broke all the Navy rules and he got them to decide how to run the ship, showing their intent to him as leader, and he worked with people in a totally different frame of energy. So his ship became such a good place to be that all the Navy captains who had an annual meeting always had it on the Santa Fe because the chefs and the cooks on the Santa Fe created the best recipes and the best food. Because Marquet said, what will make a difference on this ship? And the chef said, can we have high caliber food? And they did, just as part of that exercise. He turned over control. He allowed the energy of his people to drive a successful tin can under the ocean for 6 months at a time. This is Jos de Blok, who works in a healthcare organization in the Netherlands called Buurtzorg, and it's home-based care for nurses who look after people who need dressings changed, medicinal administration, rehabilitation, whatever it might be. He created a human-centered design around healthcare. He said, I don't want to chase targets, I don't want to fill in forms, I don't want to have bureaucracy driving healthcare. I want my nurses to get to know their patients, have cups of tea with them, be responsible for their humanity as well as their health and well-being. And he has now the highest patient satisfaction records in the world, and they're the Netherlands' top employer year on year, and they've done a study about the cost of running it that way versus the target KPI way, identical. So human-centered design is not more expensive. It levels out because we can create a different kind of feel to the energy inside an organization. And this is Tangerine, a bank in Canada, whose energy to serve the customer is so profound that when they have a product launch, everybody drops tools, whether they're the FD or the catering manager, and you man the phones and you answer emails and you go into branches. So as a result of that, their customer to staff member ratio is about 4 times higher than other banking institutes. And so they're able to serve more people without spending more money because they swarm to the problems and the issues and the challenges. And that's the CEO in the middle there, Steve Aceto, who when he first started the bank, put himself up for election after the first year. He said, look, if you want me to lead it, I will. If you don't, I'll move and find somebody else. And so there's a real open democracy going on at Tangerine. And then this is a tech company called Menlo Innovations, the noisiest tech company I know because they don't email each other or use Slack. They work in pairs and they talk to each other. Yes, there's a ubiquitous dog in a technology company. They don't have fake grass, though. But this is a place where the highest level of quality is achieved because people's energy is towards togetherness, not competition. So they work together to create great products, which is just as well, really, because their product is the software that supports heart monitors, incubators, kidney dialysis machines, jet engine diagnostics. This is software that can't go wrong. And because they work on their energy in pairs and they spot each other's mistakes before they're even made in a release, they have the highest quality of product. And as a result of that, they have some pretty happy people who work there. The place is called the Joy Factory as a kind of subtext. And then this is Spotify, who you may have heard of from Stockholm, who now have kind of reinvented the way we consume music. And in Spotify, if you want to work on a project, you socialize your idea. If enough of your colleagues want to join you in a squad, you take forward your idea and you become an internal entrepreneur. Spotify don't have to engineer their energy. They just capitalize on what people want to do to drive their business forward. And so I guess those are the assertions, and these are also companies who just do it differently, who just say, What we want to do is not utilize people, it's to let them flourish. So as Andy said earlier, they grow our businesses. Whether it's a blogging company, a bank, a white goods manufacturer, a design agency, carpet tiles, you've got the lot here. So this stuff is not the stuff that only works in 15-person tech companies. This is the stuff that can work in a crane manufacturer in Austria, which is Palfinger, where people take responsibility for each other and look after each other's energy so they don't go home exhausted. And I wanted to pick on one company on this slide, which is Barry Waymiller. It's an engineering company in the US. There's about 25,000 people who work there. And a couple of things are really amazing about Barry Waymiller. Firstly, they have the lowest divorce rate of any company in the US. And that's consciously part of their success criteria because they say they want to send people home happy, send people home with energy, not burnt out, miserable, fight with their nearest other, and then cause family breakups, which make them even unhappier and then lost in the world. So that's an interesting output from a company. But also what goes on at Barry Waymiller is in each of their outlets, there's about 9 or 10 of them across the States, they've got an open-top sports car that every weekend somebody gets to use for free based on the fact that the team have nominated them as making a massive contribution to each other and the work they're doing. So that's nice. That's a nice benefit. But the other thing that I really like about this story is what happens when people get that sports car. They either drive to their mums to say, Mum, I've got the sports car, do you fancy coming out? And the story behind it is my colleagues loved what I did, so I got the sports car. Or even if their mum's gone, they'll go to their mum's grave and they'll apparently say, Mum, I won the sports car this week. You did good by me. Now, that's not the normal stuff you get from a company. That's not the normal energy you create in an organization. But Barry Waymiller say that's how we are successful because we look after people who are gifted to us by their relatives and their nearest and dearest. So it might sound a bit happy-clappy, but there's lots of research from companies that are part of the World Blue List that will tell you economically they'll outperform by about 5 times companies who don't operate in that more soulful and humanist way. So I think we can systemically change this. And we've got inspiration around us. We just need to find us. And we can channel that energy into how we design the systems. We need to cross the chasm. We've got a few companies I'm talking about here that are visionary and enthusiastic and challenging. And then we've got a load of other people going, well, I'm only going to do it if it makes sense. And a load of people here going, I'm only going to do it if some other people are going to do it. And as Gary Hamel once said, somebody's got to be first to Mars before we then know everybody else can be first to Mars. I think we can ignore the skeptics. They're going to hate it, whatever. These are the mood hoovers personified. So let's work with the critical mass here to join visionary companies and enthusiasts who are creating workplaces where human beings flourish. Some of it comes in design. Matt's talked about that. So I think we can use design thinking as a methodology. I'm not going to give you a lesson in that right now, but check it out when you can. And we can use things like agile and squads and scrums, because the one thing I've been finding in the work I've been doing with HR teams lately is we get excited again about doing a project, even if it's a driver policy. Believe it or not, I've seen an HR team scrum together to create a new driver policy with energy that you would think is normally reserved to things like a trip to the Hacienda or watching England win the World Cup. Oh, did I just say that out loud? Sorry. So I think there's something in how we do it. We can run 5-day sprints. We can challenge ourselves to lock ourselves down, create a different energy, and build some products that are going to change how we do things. And so I hope you are now starting to think, where's your edge? Where's the place where you can go to get this sense of energy, this sense of refreshed vibe? And I'll certainly hope to meet you there, because that's where I want to spend my time. I don't want to be in the cage. I want to be at the edge. And with that, I think I might leave you to go and think about lunch as a healthy, well-being type of energy. But yeah, that's my assertion. That's what I'm hoping we can start to do with NHR. We can create something where energy is regenerative and people say, I'm glad I work in a place like that. And go get Marvin Gaye stuff on Spotify. You won't regret that either. Brilliant. Okay, thank you.